one of the things that I learned is like fish fries is like a major piece of the strategy. Like, you want to get people together, you need to do a fish fry at a church on a weeknight. And I've seen hundreds of people show up for fish fries, and then you get a candidate in the room and they get to speak to them while they're eating fish.
You are not the main character in everyone's story. You're the main character in yours. And sometimes people will float through the world thinking that they're the main character in everyone's, which you take on more heartbreak, you take on more pain because, they did that because they're upset with me, or they did it. That has nothing to do with you, baby.
First time in Boston, I came for about a month and a half, and I was like, I'm never coming back. I hated it. I was like, this city is not for me. I don't know where the community is, where the Black and brown community is. If there is community, what are they doing? And so I was like, yeah, I'm never coming back.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Through with a Splash of Tea. I'm your host, Cass, and let's hop right in. So today, we are honored to have a true visionary with us, Anthony Davis Jr. A proud Morehouse graduate, Anthony is the founder and CEO of the Davis System, a Boston-based firm that's making waves at the intersection of politics, community, empowerment, and social impact. Recently named one of Boston Magazine's 150 most influential Bostonians, Anthony has dedicated his career to amplifying the voices of marginalized communities and driving political change from the ground up. Today, we'll talk about his journey, the lessons he's learned, and the impact he's making through his work. So let's dive right in. But first, I have to thank you, Anthony, for being here and coming here today and sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited for our conversation today.
Yay, that makes me so happy. Like, genuinely. Okay, so I want to start at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. Anthony, I want to know a bit about your background, a bit about where you grew up, a bit about how that impacted you in getting into Morehouse, as I've mentioned, mm-hmm. which is phenomenal. Let's talk about that. Let's start at the very beginning. So did you come from a two-parent household, and do you have any siblings?
Yeah, so I grew up in a two-parent household. I had an older sister. She's 5 years older than me. And I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right outside of D.C. It's a D.C. suburb, I would say. And Prince George's County, when I was growing up, was actually the most affluent, predominantly Black county in the country. And so I bring that up to say that I grew up in a space, in a place where Black excellence, for lack of better terms, was expected, and it wasn't an exception. And so my teachers were Black, doctors were Black, dentists were Black, police chiefs were Black, majority of the public officials were Black where I grew up. And so, being Black and being exceptional wasn't looked at as like, oh, like you weren't like put into this box of like, yeah, being this exceptional Black person. And so it was more the expectation. And so growing up, that I embodied that, or I lived that. And so, through high school, I played sports and was I would say a good student. I always was above a 3.0 GPA and in high school. And, when I was growing up, I also wasn't, and we'll talk about this a lot, I'm sure, as we go into my more of the story, but politics wasn't, although growing up in a DC suburb, it wasn't something that I grew up caring about necessarily. I didn't see my parents necessarily like volunteering or getting involved politically with campaigns. I saw them vote, every once in a while, but it wasn't like we're coming home and having conversations like my wife and I do now. And so, politics was something that I stumbled upon later in my life. But I will say one thing I did see growing up was my parents' service. Service was at the heart of what my parents did. Both of my parents were heavily involved in our church growing up. My dad was a deacon. My mom helped run the nursery ministry. My sister danced in our church, like the dance group there. My dad was a coach voluntarily for the sports teams at the church. And so I always saw service. I was raised in a household of service and giving back of your time and talent. And so, I necessarily growing up, I didn't see it like that. But as I've gotten older and gotten more into my career, I've been able to reflect and realize like that was really instilled in me early.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's phenomenal. That's so important.
Yeah.
But so many things. Okay. So that goes to show how your kids will absorb what you do, but to the extent that you don't even know, because so so much of who you are and what you do is service, literally just by watching, just by seeing your parents give their time, give their energy, give their money. Like, that's so impactful. But I want to go back to your town, for your city for a quick second. So everyone, like you said, Black excellence was more the norm, the expectation. Do you think that like being in that environment created or did a large part in creating like the excellent person that you are today? Because you could still be who you are today and have grown up in an environment that wasn't majority of Black people doing great things. So that being your norm, was it too much at some times? Do you think it completely contributed greatly to who you are? I want you to reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, because I think it could have created a complex within me. And I think also looking at other friends, I think to an extent it did. And everyone isn't necessarily in the same space. And I think one of the things that I will say, although I did grow up in this, affluent Black county, I didn't necessarily grow up with affluence. And I think that is what played a major factor in me being the person that I am today, because I didn't have some of the privileges that a lot of my friends grew up with, I'll say. And so there was still kind of this instinctual kind of aspect of survival and making it growing up, and watching my parents also kind of live check to check sometimes, or career to career, and not wanting to kind of be in the same position once I got into adulthood, and wanting to have a kind of steady career, and so from school to sports to really the extracurriculars that I did in school, I was always the person who was like, I need to do this to the best of my abilities. And it was just like, that came from where we lived, and also like comparing yourself to other folks who are in similar positions, have similar backgrounds to you. You realize like, yeah, you need to push yourself to go hard. And yes, this could create a dynamic, but at the same time, when you come home and you don't necessarily have those parents who are doctors and lawyers who are at home also creating that dynamic for you, I felt like there was more friendly competition amongst my friends and less of a kind of dynamic that my parents were creating at home with their expectations on me.
That's beautiful. That's so much. That's so much, because there's so much power in the hustle. There's so much power in the drive, and you had that early on, but it was also influenced by the household that you grew up in, and that's amazing. I love. Anthony, I want to dive into Morehouse a little bit. It's one of our HBCUs that the Black community is very proud to. Those that went, very proud to go to, as they should be. I want to get a little into that and talk about you applying, you getting in, and then your experience while there. So let us know a little bit about that. Yeah.
So deciding on Morehouse was an interesting process. I didn't know what an HBCU was probably until my sophomore, junior year of high school. I had heard of Morehouse more from a historic standpoint, to your point of like Dr. King went there, Spike Lee is a proud alum, but I didn't necessarily hear of it in the context of being in historically Black college and university. And so during my junior year, I went on a college tour I had a chance to go on a college tour, and it was my sophomore year, sorry. And we visited, during the tour, we went down south and we visited, in each state we went to, we visited a PWI and we visited an HBCU. So North Carolina, we did University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then we did North Carolina A&T. In Atlanta, we did Georgia Tech, and we did Morehouse and Spelman. In Alabama, I think we did Auburn, and we did like Alabama State. And so quickly, you get to kind of see these institutions juxtaposed against each other. And for me, it was a no-brainer. It was like, yeah, I get the esteem and the prestige of some of these colleges. UNC Chapel Hill, beautiful campus, huge campus. But then once I went to North Carolina A&T, I'm like, these are my people. Like, this feels like home. This feels comfortable, and it doesn't feel like I will be out of place. And for me, my last 2 years of high school, I actually went to a predominantly white high school back in Maryland, where I grew up. And that was, I think, for me, something that I wanted from my college experience was to be surrounded by more people who look like me, who have experiences similar to mine. And so going into junior year, I was very set on applying to Morehouse. I ended up applying to HBCUs as well. I didn't apply to any school within 4 hours of home because I wanted to be as far away as possible. I applied to Hampton, which is another HBCU. I applied to Morehouse, obviously, and then I applied to a lot of other schools, but I'll say my top three. And then I applied to St. John's University up in New York. And at the time when I was going to college, I wanted to go into sports journalism. I was a big athlete in high school, and going into college, I knew I wanted to be in the journalism space. I wanted to be an English major. I wanted to write. I wanted to do things like this. And so
there's still time.
Yeah, I know. And I had the training, so I went to school for it. And so, St. John's at the time was, it was one of the top journalism schools in the country. It was in New York. And so I just thought about all of the access that I would have to like sports teams, internships. But once that Morehouse letter came in, it was no convincing me otherwise of where to go. My dad, I know, sat with me and tried to explain the financial aid piece of how much I was getting from St. John's and how much support we would have gotten. And I was just like, sorry, I'm not hearing that. We're going to take these loans out and we're going to Morehouse. And I mean, it was honestly the best experience of my life. It was the best 4 years of my life. I think Morehouse helped me awaken my kind of my consciousness of what's happening in the world and what's happening in the country around me. And, growing up in this kind of, I like to say PG County was an oasis of like Black excellence. So it's like, once you go to other parts of the country, you quickly realize like, that's not necessarily the standard. And especially going to school in Georgia, I realized as soon as I got off campus and once I got outside of Atlanta, Georgia is Georgia. And it's not necessarily a kind place to few folks who look like us. And so I started to realize those things. And I would say during my freshman year was 2012 during President Obama's re-election campaign, actually. And I remember during my freshman year, there were so many people on campus like volunteering and doing things. And I was just like, why y'all care so much about this? Like, why does this matter? And like, I even remember like I was 18 years old. I could have voted in that election and I didn't because I didn't necessarily know how to. I didn't have the resources on campus to do it. And, looking back on that experience now, it's like a lot of the work that I do is kind of driven by my lack of awareness and care when I was coming into college and wanting to make sure that any young person that I interact with, that I get a chance to like instill anything into, that they have that consciousness is at least like peaked or it's touched on a little bit so that they can, something that I'm going to say to them, hopefully 3 years down the line will register. So it hits them before they're a freshman on college campus and like, why does this matter to y'all? It would be like, oh, you know what? That guy, Anthony Davis, told me one time that this type of stuff matters. And that's why all these people are here and they're doing this. And maybe I should get involved.
That's so good. That's so good. So much like you, I didn't know too much about HBCUs. So I'm from a predominantly white community. And then for high school, I moved to a major city. And this is a large regret of mine, but transitioning from a predominantly white community to a major city, which was majority Black and brown. When it was time to apply to college, I was like, well, I know what an HBCU is, but I don't know too much about it, one. And two, what I also know is that it's not a true reflection of the real world. that was my thought process. So when I exit this HBCU and I go into the real world, it's not going to look like my HBCU. But neither did my high school. So I think I wish I reevaluated that even more, because I think I would have been able to be in a space where I saw Black and brown greatness versus like the reality of Black and brown people in a community that, you know, that needs a little bit more assistance. So I love when I meet people that went to HBCUs, because I was like, dang, you really did it. Like you really did it. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one other thing about just going about an HBCU is also, like, I think one of the other kind of benefits of being there was that, and I think this is a little bit to your point, is like you realize that there's so many different types of Black people. Like growing up, where I grew up, is like I have an idea of what Blackness is, and it's like you go there, you go to the HBCU, and you realize like there's Black people from everywhere. And it's like, I think one of the things that I always say was like the biggest culture shock for me was seeing people who were my age preaching. Like they were in pulpits, like they have been in pulpits since they were 12, 13 years old. Like they grew up in their family church, and that their grandfather preaching and their father preaching, and now them at 12 years old, they're preaching it. And it was just like, that's one example, but just like seeing that there's so many different types of Black people, and even to get into this institution, like for us to still have so many differences, but yet we all still landed here, is just like really beautiful as well.
Yes. And it goes to show that your background doesn't necessarily depict where you're going to end, like, right? Where you're going to end up. Okay, so let's talk about graduating from Morehouse and transitioning to Boston.
Yep.
How was that transition for you? Why Boston? Like all those things.
Yeah. So I, coming out of Morehouse, I worked on a lot of political campaigns around the country. Got dragged around the country. I say by one of my mentors who helped me get on a lot of campaigns, and one of those campaigns in 2018 brought me to Boston. I actually worked on Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley's first race for Congress in 2018. And during that race, it was my first time in Boston. I came for about a month and a half, and I was like, I'm never coming back. I hated it. I was like, this city is not for me. I don't know where the community is, where the Black and brown community is. If there is community, what are they doing? And so I was like, yeah, I'm never coming back. So I left actually after that and went back home to Maryland and was there for a few months. And then I actually ended up coming back to Boston in 2019 to work on Senator Warren's presidential campaign. She was running for election in 2020, but we started in 2019. And during that time, coming back to Boston, I had an opportunity to actually explore the city a little bit more. I had actually met my wife, my would-be wife, on Congresswoman Pressley's campaign in 2018. And so when I came back in 2019, I was living with her family. I was like in her community. And so I got to experience city in a different way. I got to see the culture, the vibrant culture that the city has, the diverse culture that the city has, and actually like challenge myself to actually go out and try and experience the city. When I first came, I was so focused on the campaign and like trying to make a name for myself that I didn't actually allow myself to go out and see the city. So in 2019, 2020, I actually did that. And, I think slowly but surely I started falling in love with the city, seeing it for, like I said, what it is diverse, rich culture. And also seeing that there's things that need to be improved with the city as well. And that I felt as though even with like what I got to do in 2018 with Congresswoman Pressley's campaign, that I was kind of involved in how the city was changing. And I felt like I needed to stick around. And it was, I didn't know for sure what that meant, but then, a few campaigns later, ended up working on now Boston Mayor Michelle Wu's campaign, and I was I was her field director on her campaign, and first woman, first person of color, first Asian American person to be elected to mayor of Boston, in the 250-year history of the city. I can say for sure that I have contributed to making the city a better place and actually changing the course of the city as well. And that makes me feel good. It gives me chills just saying that. I don't think I've ever said it like that. Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of doing campaign work?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's actually an easy answer for me. It's the competitiveness of it. For me, like, again, I was an athlete growing up, and so I was used to every day, like, practicing or weightlifting or doing something to try to create a competitive advantage. In campaigns, I feel like it's the same thing. You have this finite time, like election day is always the end. And so, however long you have backtrack, every day it counts. Like every hour counts. Like I joke around with some folks that I worked on campaigns with, like, I can get done in a day what a lot of people can get done in a week because of working on campaigns and wanting to create that advantage. So like that kind of daily competition and how do I create that advantage over my opponent, that really drives me. I get a thrill out of that.
Yes. Okay, so I should have asked you this earlier. What was your sport that you...
I play basketball.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love that you mentioned the competition of it all, because it is really like, I feel like when you're working on a campaign, it's like you're practicing. And then you have some games, but then like we're ready for we're trying to go to the championship. We're trying to win that championship.
Yep.
And that's,
absolutely.
And like you're just driving and going. I know this will be we're going to get into the Davis system, but I have another campaign question. So you originally, when you begin your campaign work, you had a small team. And then as you continued your campaign work, your team started to grow and get rather large. Mm-hmm. What were some difficulties that first of all, was it intimidating having your team grow, or were you okay with that as you transitioned to work on different campaigns? And then secondly, what is one of the most challenging factors of overseeing more people?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I will say that I wasn't necessarily ready to manage folks. I would say like the first time that I was really put in a management position was during the Mayor Wu's campaign in 2021. And I say that because I went from like, I would say the most folks that I've ever managed with up to that point was like 2 or 3 people. And I went to having a team that I was managing of 10 by the end of the campaign in 21. And I think that it's one of those things that you learn trial by fire if you aren't properly prepared. And I made a lot of mistakes. But I think one of the things that did prepare me was that I had been managed by a lot of different people up to that point. And what I did want to do was bring the good things that I saw from managers and really avoid the bad things that I saw from folks. And one of those things, especially within campaigns, is being really mindful of people's time. And their energy levels and avoiding burnout. Because on campaigns, that's so easy. Like you are working sometimes 12 to 15 hour days. You're working, when I came up in campaigns, we were working 7 days a week. We have unions now in campaigns. So those hours are a little less. Sometimes it's just 4 to 5 days a week. But you have to be, as a manager, really mindful of, yes, you have all your work and your goals and what you need to get done, but in that space, really being mindful of your team. And I think that if anything that I did right was that, and maybe some of them will hear this podcast and be like, yeah, I don't know. But I do think that was something that I tried to be really mindful of. And even like in those more intense times, like, how do you try to make this fun? Or like, can we go out and like have a drink after and like at least decompress so that it doesn't feel like it's just like we all work together, we go home and then we come back and work together and go home, and we don't get to ever, humanize each other. And I think that's the other thing within campaigns, that culturally, like everything is kind of geared towards the candidate. And I would say like the way that I think about running campaigns, especially now that I've, now have my own business, and now I'm more from a advisor standpoint, giving advice to campaigns. It's like, how are you creating a sustainable culture that's not just revolving around this person and this date of election day? Like, how are you creating something that's going to be sustainable beyond all of that? Because what if you lose, or even if you win, like these people, the people that you are engaging throughout the campaign should continue to still be engaged. And that matters. And I think what the campaign does during the campaigning time plays a lot of, it has a lot of impact on how their communities are able to continue to advocate or organize beyond the campaign as well.
That's so important. That's so important, because whether we win or lose, these people should still believe in your ideas for the city, believe in what you want to push forward or move forward. And it's like, if you treat them like machines your entire campaign, you're gonna lose those machines once they're done.
This is something that I've seen happen. Like, I think I came in kind of the middle of it, but I've seen this happen over my time in campaigns, which is now going on 10 years or so. That you've seen people get treated like you said, like machines, and like you are just serving this purpose, and they get burnt out. And now especially people who were working on campaigns, now they don't want to do it anymore. And right now, like, a problem that we are having across the country, here in Massachusetts as well, in the city of Boston, is that there's a pipeline issue. Like, we don't have people to work on campaigns anymore because of the culture of campaigns. And being honest, you don't get paid a lot of money also when you're working on these campaigns. So to be overworked, underpaid, and then never seen as a human, as a person, as only what you can contribute, I wouldn't want to come back to that type of culture either. And maybe I was foolish for continuing to come back to it. But I think it's part of what I'm trying, what I really feel charged to change within campaigns as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Creating an environment where it's not just work. Okay, so now let's transition onto the Davis system. Yes. Okay, so give us a small background of the Davis system, why we started it, what initially made us start it, and then also the year it was started, and then we'll deep dive into it.
I'll start with the year it was started. It actually was started coming out of Mayor Wu's campaign in 2021. I founded it in December of 2021. And the Davis system is I like to say, a small boutique firm based in Boston, where we are a social impact firm, and we serve at the intersection of social impact and project management. And what that really means is that we try and ensure that any project, whether it be working with a nonprofit or working with a campaign or working with an elected official once they're already in office, whatever we're doing has some type of impact on making the community better. And, I think social impact is like a loaded term, but when you really unpack it, it's really like, how are you impacting society?
Yeah.
And for us, is how do you impact society positively? And so to that, it's getting, people of color, young people elected to office. It's preparing, like I said, that bench of people who can work on campaigns and work in elected officials' offices and people who can run for office. It's also preparing communities and equipping communities with the skills to advocate for themselves, and so that they understand the government process and that these people work for you ultimately, and helping people realize their power as well. So the Davis system kind of came out of, and I'll say this really quickly, is that during my time, as I said, I worked on a lot of campaigns in different places around the country, and there were always rooms where the decisions were being made where there weren't a lot of folks who look like you and I in those rooms. Those are the consultant rooms or the advisor rooms. And as a person who was kind of on a lower tier on the campaign, lower level, I used to always see, everybody going into this room, and it's a bunch of straight white men going into the room, and they're making the decisions for how we're going to engage Black and brown communities, how we're going to engage LGBTQ communities, immigrant communities, and none of them have any familiarity with those communities. And so for me, the Davis system was that I knew that I had both the skills and the experience of working on campaigns, and also cultural understanding that my voice needed to be in those rooms. My perspective needed to be in those rooms. And furthermore, like, my community needs to be in those rooms. And having folks who don't come from our communities telling candidates how to talk to our communities is why we see a lot of the disconnect right now that we see with politics. I don't necessarily subscribe to a party, but I am a Democrat. But I see right now that that's really the issue that we're having in politics, is that there's a lot of these, this consultant class that's predominantly white, predominantly male, predominantly straight, and they are creating the engagement strategies for all these communities, and that's why the communities aren't engaged. So for me, the Davis system is really to make sure that our community has a seat at the table, honestly, in these rooms, and that their voices are being represented.
Yes. Because no matter how like pure of heart that you enter, like say, hey, I do want to help this community. I'm this white older man. I'm 50. I'm white. My daughter has a Black best friend. Like maybe I want to help this community, but like you aren't submerged. Like it's not enough. You aren't submerged in it. You don't really know what the day-to-day is like. You don't really know what my auntie or my mother is struggling with. Like you have these ideas based on Google, based on just pop culture or whatever, but you don't really know. Yeah. So the easiest way to know is to bring in somebody that changes the room a little bit, but they know because it's their experience. They didn't hear about it, it's there.
Absolutely. And I've seen it, especially working on campaigns time and time again, like there's, sometimes a fear to go into certain communities, like even in terms of just like sending staff into these communities where it's like, well, we need to engage these people. They need to vote. Like they need to be educated on their options to vote, but it's a fear that because you've never been there, to your point, it's like you're just reading statistics about this neighborhood. You're reading about how unsafe this neighborhood is, but you've never been there. And once you're there, you may be looked at a little differently. Like, who are you? And like, I can go and I can establish trust. I know how to navigate these spaces. And so even that, it's like, I think that is a valuable perspective in these rooms when we're creating strategy. It's like, yes, I can physically do it, but now it's like, I need to be the person helping you decide when and how you're going to approach these communities as well.
Okay, so going back to the Davis system, but fundamentally, so my audience, say an audience member like knows nothing about campaigns, knows nothing about governmental systems and programs and all those things. So does the Davis system only work with campaigns and governmental businesses and large foundations? Or can a person that just recently started a business, or maybe he's had it for 5 years, come and say, hey, I need a little bit of help? Does it work? How does it work?
Yes, absolutely. So we have helped, we work with small businesses, we work with smaller organizations. And I would say, like, even in that case, in that situation, like, we don't solely do politics. Like, I think the business started with that at the sole kind of focus, but now we've shifted into, I would say, looking at our work as more from a community engagement standpoint. Like, how do we help you as, a small business or a nonprofit organization, or if you have this program that you want to get out into the community, like, how are we helping you connect that program and get it out into the community in a way that's, again, culturally competent, that gives people a greater understanding of what it is your program is and how they can actually get, how they can benefit from being involved with you or your program or your organization or your business. And so we've helped, we also, I would say, from the community engagement standpoint, we also do project management. And so, like, we've helped small businesses, whether it be like if they're preparing for like an anniversary and kind of want to do like a campaign. And this is also where, campaigns can also be used to lead up to something. Like, it is ultimately leading up to something. So building towards something. So we kind of use the campaign structure to also help businesses as they, if they want to do something for their 10-year anniversary. Like, what does that project or what does that campaign look like? Or we're getting you on media, we're getting you on podcasts, we're going to be writing things, we're going to have smaller events that leads up to the larger event. And we've done that. We've helped with kind of fellowship programs with folks who want to, either train or teach folks how to organize or how to, be involved in community. And so like, I would say like our work there is a political aspect to it, and like that's that. But then there's also like this more community forward facing piece of like, how do you either brand yourself or how do you kind of brand your opportunity or program that you have in the community?
Yes, that's so good, because that creates a space where you can help everyone.
Absolutely. That's the way that the way that I think about our work is that it's a two-way street. It's mutually beneficial for both parties. Like at the end of the day, the community, ideally, because we're only working with people who we trust, have good intentions for the community. The community is going to benefit from whatever it is that we're coming in to talk to them about or to convince them to do. But then also the organization or the elected official or the business is also benefiting from that connection to the community as well.
All right, I want to talk about how you measure success. So if somebody comes to you, whether it be a political campaign or just, hey, we're going to our anniversary or we're headed to opening day or launch, and you're working with them for a few months or a few weeks, or I want to discuss how long you typically work with clients, but how do you begin to measure success, whether these plans are working or no, we need to try something else?
Yeah. So I think a few things. One is, how much have we contributed to kind of scaling presence? The Davis system, how much are we helping whoever we're working with scale their presence? So whether that be
in new communities or just overall
in their targeted communities. And that's one of the things that we actually really talk about it, and on our website and our mission statement is really helping you connect to the communities you want to get connected to. And so is your name recognition growing? Are you getting, additional kind of hits on social media? Are you getting more impressions on social media? And then also ultimately, are more people in the community knowing who you are, but then also what, if it's a business or a company, like what is the program that you are trying to get out into community? I would say the other piece is then also how internally are we, we kind of have systems in place where we are, we really care a lot about operations. My wife is our chief of operations, Erin Davis, and I spent 30 minutes and I'm so late giving her a shout out. So I'll hear about that later. But
tell her too.
Yeah, but she really helps us kind of operationalize everything that we're doing with the company. And she kind of keeps us on the back end very organized in terms of making sure we have different systems in place to monitor are we on a weekly basis, we're meeting with clients. Most of our clients we meet on a weekly basis. So it's week to week, are we building on the objectives that we've set for the previous week? And I think that's been the most kind of proven way to see that. And then also ultimately, at the end, it's how does the client feel? And that matters a lot to me, because I think that sometimes you can do a lot of work and they don't necessarily see or feel it. And I feel like we've had that experience before where it's we felt like we were just oh, we're doing everything, and it's just the client at the end isn't necessarily they don't necessarily see that. They didn't necessarily get that. And so that matters to an extent, because ultimately that's how you retain folks. That's how folks continue to kind of spread your message in the community as well, or to other folks as well. But I think ultimately how at the end is making sure that we have hit all of the objectives that we set out in our contract with the client, and then how they feel, I would say at the end.
We have to dive into your wife for just 1 second.
Okay.
So you were already married when the Davis system started, or not yet?
We were not. We were engaged. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So not to cut you off, but I want to know, I love this conversation. How was the conversation? Because obviously it typically happens at night. So for me, it happens in the shower where this thing just pops up in my head and I'm like, ooh, that's a business. Mm-hmm. And I really like this. And I've been thinking about the things leading up to this for a while, but I just wasn't able to put it together. And in the shower, it all comes together. So that conversation with your wife is, hey, I'm looking to start this business. This is what I want to do. How was that? How did that go?
So it had been happening over time. So we actually, we got together in 2019, started dating in 2019. In 2020, pandemic obviously affected everybody. We actually moved in together. We had been long distance up to that point, and then we moved in together in the pandemic. So that was an interesting time for our relationship.
Yeah, that's a true test. You guys
yeah,
like
absolutely.
swim.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We're gonna literally, we can't leave this house, but we're gonna live together.
Right. And during, I would say like the Davis system really was, it came out of the idea of the Davis system came out of the pandemic. I was unemployed during the pandemic, and I was just like, I don't ever want to be here again. Like, I don't ever want to have my employment based on someone else. And a global, like, knowing now that a global pandemic would cause you to lose your job potentially. And so I wanted to be pandemic proof, is what I like to say. And so during that time, I remember like starting to have the conversation with Erin and telling her like, no, I think I want to start a firm that helps get people elected to office. Like, I felt like at that point, again, I had been working on so many campaigns, but I had told her, I was like, I feel like I'm more talented and I can do more than just one thing at a time. And I think that was really the catalyst for wanting to start the Davis system, was like, the impact needs to be felt in more than one place at a time. And so we, I started having those conversations with her over the pandemic. And then once we won the election with Mayor Wu, that was the first sign. And then I would say a few days after that election, I started getting calls from other firms who were interested in bringing me on to their firm, bringing me to join their firm, and making me an employee. Mm-hmm. And I thank God for the insight and for the ability that I didn't even necessarily have at the time, but maybe it was a little bit of ego, too. But it was like, if these people are offering me jobs to come join their firm, that must mean that they see a portfolio of business that I can bring them as well. Like, you're not calling me the day or a few days after I win this election because you don't see the longevity and what's going to come with being able to roll out my name associated with your firm within a week of me winning this historic election. So having that insight and having good mentors who I also was able to run that by and just, am I thinking about this right? Or am I tripping? Like, is this my ego? And they all, I would say, confirmed for me, like, that I was thinking about that right. Like, these people they're reaching out to you because they do see the potential that you have. So for me, that was the final kind of sign to start the Davis system. And I told Erin, I was like, give me 6 months. I was like, between what I had saved up from the Davis system, from working on campaigns, and then she was working at Boston Public Schools at the time, I was like, give me 6 months, and I if we don't have clients, if I don't have anything for the Davis system in 6 months, then I will find a job. I will go back and I'll get something full time. And fast forward 6 months later, like, not only was the Davis system thriving, but she was able to leave her job at BPS and come join the Davis system. So that's nothing short of a miracle, but a step out on faith as well. Like, it was, I knew I had to define time. I had to define kind of, I knew what the idea was. I knew what my time frame was. And so it was just like, is all the things that I think is happening right now, I have to this is the only time that this makes sense to step out and do this. And so it worked. From there, the clients started coming in early in 2022, and we've been going since then.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she, I am thankful for her, like, trusting me. I'm thankful for her, like, seeing the vision and not being like, we got a wedding to pay for in a year, and I need you to get a job, and just like being willing to stick from it. And even like I mean, the fact that we paid for our entire wedding off of our business, like at that point, we had been working for ourselves for a year and a half at that point when we had our wedding. So like, even like that was such a, for me, like looking back on it, it was like, this is a flex. Like at the end of the day, like this is self-made. Like we didn't get a lot of help from our parents, and like we didn't get no seed money from anyone. And so it was a major moment and milestone.
That's so good. I need to touch base on, that was so good. We don't think about the fact that if a company is reaching out to you, especially after a success, whether large or small, if a company's reaching out to you after a success and they see what you can bring to them, and they value you so much that they took the time to reach out to you, or had somebody take the time to reach out to you because they said, I want him. I see his value. I want him. So he can work for me. But no, in those, when reading those emails that you receive from those companies or getting those phone calls, that should tell you like, no, I'm so valuable that they want to seek me. Why can't I be a competitor?
Right. That was exactly the thought process. And it's like, if it doesn't have to happen overnight, but it's like, I do know that there's going to be opportunities. And I will say in 2022, I got an opportunity to work on Governor Healey's campaign. And that was the first campaign that the Davis system officially got to do. And it's the governor of Massachusetts. And I would say like, if anything, like that was a moment that kind of confirmed that I would have been given that to some other firm that was well established, that would have been able to now associate their brand with the governor, versus like this being the first thing that my business was able to do. And that gave me so much validation. Like, oh, you worked with the governor? Like, you weren't staff. You had your own company. Your company was contracted by the governor's campaign. Like, that validated us in so many spaces, and I think allowed folks to see us more seriously as well as a business.
I'm so happy you brought up Governor Healey's campaign, because that ties in my next question. So it's very important to approach different communities based on the best way for them to receive the information. Absolutely. Or the best way for them to digest this business or digest this governor or whatever. So when working on a campaign like Healey's, like Warren's, like Wu's, you have to have the mindset of, okay, these are the communities that this governor wants to, or this person wants to implement themselves into. How do you create, and then you have to create a strategy to do so, but specified to each community. So we have some communities that are similar, but then we have some communities that are very different. So how do you do the work of figuring out how a community receives information and receives a new person, or is even welcome or willing to listen to this person speak? Or how do you specify what a community needs, and how do you figure that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I go back to actually my time working on Warren's presidential campaign, because that time actually allowed me to learn that it's better to listen than to always come in with your own plan. I was forced during that campaign at times to sometimes there were a few different weeks where we went out, and for a week we would spend a week in a state. So I spent a week in Georgia, I spent a week in Tennessee, and I spent a week in North Carolina. And during that week, for 5 days, you would basically drive to a new city every day. And you would walk into a room full of volunteers who want to get involved with the campaign, who want to help out, but they also are there to listen to you as a person from the campaign, as a staff person. And so what I realized is in each of those rooms when I was traveling from city to city is that I didn't have the time to like really research what is the city that I'm going into, and like how do they best receive this information? Who are going to be the type of people who are going to come to this meeting even? And so I learned quickly to create a structure where I can position myself where they can know that I know what I'm talking about, and I know strategy. I can tell you strategy, but I also want to sit back and listen to you. I want to hear how previous presidential campaigns have come into your community, if they've come into your community, and how was that engagement? And did it feel, were they extracting, or were they actually pouring into your community? I was able to learn that, like you said, every community, even in the same state, is not the same. And so when I do organizing, I apply the same principles. Like I think about listening more than we're talking. Even when I work with candidates and campaigns sometimes, like especially once, like most recently I actually had a chance to we had a chance to run our first campaign outside of Massachusetts, and it happened to be back in PG County where I grew up. So that was a full circle moment as well.
Shut up.
Awesome.
That's so cool.
But working with campaigns, and I've kind of voluntarily helped out a few other campaigns outside of the state. You have to also, especially like as a consultant, like you also have to listen to the campaign as well. Like they feel as though, and there's sometimes disagreement. There's sometimes like, I don't know if that's the best, but it's at the end of the day, these are the people who live in these places. They have either been elected officials, they've been organizing in these places. And so it's always better to listen and then go back and say like, all right, with, my kind of standard blueprint of like, this is how I organize. How can I now bring in that localized kind of information that I've gotten from these people? How can I make this, to your point, how can I tweak my plan to now make sure that it includes that local context and from what I've heard from other people?
That's so smart.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
It's like there's always a blueprint, but then it's like there's just little tweaks and little changes that you make based on the community. Like organizing down south, like one of the things that I learned is like fish fries is like a major piece of the strategy. Like you want to get people together, you need to do a fish fry at a church on a weeknight. And I've seen hundreds of people show up for fish fries, and then you get a candidate in the room and they get to speak to them while they're eating fish. And it's like, that wouldn't necessarily, like, I've never seen anybody do that in Massachusetts. Like, I've never seen anybody do that in Boston. And it's like, it probably could work, but it's very unique to the South. In the South, you have college football, and like organizing around college football is a huge deal. Like, if you can, that there's every Saturday going to be 60,000 people packed into a stadium. So if you can be outside with signs and doing visibility beforehand, like you can raise that name recognition for your candidate. And so it's always having like, we're going to stand out and hold signs in every campaign that I work on. But it's the idea of, do we do it at the farmer's market like we would in Massachusetts, or do we do it at the football games like we would in the South? And that's the kind of nuance to it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like when you talk, it's like so duh that you've been doing this for so long, because it's like, you just get it. Like, duh, you listen to people, and duh, you have to tweak like what people's experiences are in that location. For example, here, maybe a fish fry won't work, but in the summer, you put some seafood out and you do like, you do something like that. Or yeah.
And I think that also comes from my experience of seeing other people trying to do a one-size-fits-all plan in different places. Like saying like, I have my idea, I know how I want to run this program, and this is how we're going to do it. And one of the things that even when I was working on Senator Warren's presidential campaign that I heard a lot when we were traveling around was like, past presidential campaigns just came in with the one-size-fits-all program, and they didn't listen to us and they didn't involve us in what they were doing. They just came in and told us what to do. And I think on presidential campaigns that tends to be, because it's so big, it's so much to think about, so much to consider. But even on local races, sometimes a lot of people make those same mistakes as well. And that for me is like, that I think sets apart my organizing from some other folks, and why we have won some elections that we maybe shouldn't have, because we really thought about the local context and really tweaking things to fit that.
That's so good. You really listen to the people. And like, that's what, sometimes we just think that like, okay, I know how this is going to work. I have all this knowledge. I've been doing this for years and I know how this works. But you just need to, if you listen, they will tell you how it'll work, and you won't be running around your brain frying. No, just listen.
The people already know, people already have the solutions. They just need to be empowered. And I think that's one of the things that we always miss is like, these conversations are happening at the barbershop. They're happening at the hair salon every day. Like, people know what's wrong with their community. They know who's running for office. Like, we act like especially our communities of color, Black and brown communities, like when I say we act like, people in the consulting class act like Black and brown people aren't talking about politics every day. They may not be talking about it like the way that folks on CNN are talking about it, but they're talking about how it's impacting them and their lives. And if you just take the time to go listen to that, you can bring them along in the process. It may not look like they're going to go to the State House every day to advocate for themselves, but it may look like they're going to go into the schools and get students registered to vote as soon as they turn 17 and 18 years old. And I think it's like understanding that all of that makes the democracy work. All of those things are necessary for the democracy to work. And I think we sometimes forget, and we just focus on what can people do for us in campaigns.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Anthony, who exactly pays for the travel and your hotels and stuff when you're working on a campaign? Who's in charge of that?
Yeah, so we usually, if it does require us traveling, we try and build that into our contracts. And especially if we're working on campaigns outside of Mass, where we would potentially need to stay overnight, we try and map that out ahead of time. So we have those expenses and kind of let them know. And then, but the campaigns are ultimately paying us for that. And I know I mentioned earlier that they don't pay a lot, but also, it really does depend on the scale of the election. If it is something that is like a presidential campaign, obviously pays not a ton, but it pays a lot more than a city council race would, for instance. And we've done races now, not presidential, but pretty much on every other level. And so you kind of quickly learn that also, the candidate, depending on how well funded they are, at the end of the day, campaigns have to raise money from donors as well. So depending on how much money the campaign is raising is also how you try and kind of scale how much you can ask for in terms of your contract with them.
So you take a look at essentially what they're pulling in as well before you even work on the contract for it.
Absolutely. And all that information is publicly available for any person who's running for public office. They have to report that information, and so you can see both what they're bringing in, but then also what they're spending money on there as well. So I think also another thing that I have done in the past is I look at what they're paying other consultants as well, if they have, or if they've historically, you can look at past years as well. So I like to look at that as well to kind of inform what I may ask for.
All that's public information. So what somebody's spending their money on, we can take a look at?
Anybody who's running for office or is in office right now has won a campaign. All that information is online. And my wife really enjoys doing that. I'm going to give her a shout out. That's one of her things that she loves snooping through. OCPF is the website here in Massachusetts. And yeah, she loves looking through that.
Me and your wife are the same. Now I'm going to go home and
keep around.
And that's important for people that are, whether you're in the political space or not. You guys should take a look at who you're voting for. What are they spending money on?
And who are they getting their money from? Ultimately, that matters. At the end of the day, are they taking money from corporations that you don't? I mean, we see right now all of, the DEI rollbacks and by corporations. Are they getting money from those folks? Are they getting money from, developers if you live in a city where development is being overdeveloped and price of living is going up? Are they taking money from that? Because who they're getting their money from will ultimately influence what they do once they're in that position as well.
That's so good. Mm-hmm. Who's giving you this money?
And who are they spending their money with? If they're a candidate of color, but they primarily are employing white firms, why? Are there not people of color led firms that you could be reaching out to? Have you thought about the Davis system? To me, all of those things can be really informative for voters ultimately. And it's sometimes we don't get down to that level because people don't even, like you said, people don't even know to look at these type of things and that this information is available. But it does, I think it matters a lot because it definitely impacts who and what they're answering to once they're in those positions.
That's so true and so impactful. Now, yes, thank you. Now that I know that, I'm snooping all the time. All right. So I want to talk about high pressure situations. So how do you manage high pressure situations when working on a campaign while also knowing how vital it is to be a good representation within these marginalized communities. So you're the face of this campaign, and there's a lot of pressure on the campaign side of things, but you're also a person of color. So there's pressure on that side of things, like you need to represent your people correctly, but both people.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
This is such a great question. This is a uniquely, I would say, person of color experience on campaigns. To your point, it's like we have to, because our communities have been historically, like you said, marginalized. They've been systematically marginalized as well, and that results in a lack of trust with the system, for lack of better terms, lack of trust with government. And so, there's so many examples that are coming to mind for me, but I think about how I have been kind of at times put in, or people have attempted to put me in a box, both while out working on campaigns and now with the Davis system, saying like, oh, he only knows how to organize the Black community. And to me, that's an insult, but it's also something I take a lot of pride in. And so to your question, it's like, how do I respond? How do I respond to that by not showing that I'm insulted, but that I take pride in being able to organize my communities? And also that organizing our communities is a lot harder than organizing yours, because there's not this inherent distrust that already exists. Your people have benefited from the government, from the system, from all of these things that exist. And so that my people have pause at, distrust at. And so for me, it actually is something that I think is, if once you know how to organize the Black community or Hispanic community or the API community, you can actually organize any community, because you understand, you learn how to be responsive to communities. And I think that's the best way to organize communities, as I just shared, is listening. And so to me, it is a huge, it's something that I take pride in, but I understand also the responsibility to the entire campaign. I think that for me, those two things aren't, especially now in the role that I play with the Davis system, those two things they're interconnected. To be responsible to the campaign is to make sure that you're being responsible to my communities, that you're listening to my community. And that goes back to starting the Davis system, was that our community there wasn't a representation or a voice at the table. So now I feel like my role is to make sure that these campaigns are engaging my community. That doesn't mean that I don't know how to strategize and build out a strategy to engage the entirety of whatever constituency, wherever you live. I know how to do that part now. Like, I know how to do the numbers, I know how to build the strategy, but it's also like prioritizing communities of color, prioritizing marginalized communities means so much to me because of my background and my experience, and making sure that I don't ever allow the mission of winning to overpower that mission of empowering community.
Yes. And I like how you said it's in order to make sure that you're doing right by the campaign, you have to do right by the community.
Absolutely.
Because they are intertwined. Because it's so easy to disconnect. Okay, campaign wants this, community wants this. How do I? No. We're all one. We're flowing. You just have to figure out
the flow. Yeah.
Figure
out how to make it flow, that's the hard part, but it matters, and it informs decision making. And a lot of times, I mean, if we're being honest, on a national level down to the local level, a lot of campaigns and elections come down to Black communities. At the end of the day, like we just saw on the presidential level, how much Black men and Black women were at the center of the conversation and trying to sway us from supporting or even going out to vote, and how that may have played a major, I think it did play a major kind of factor in the results. But, right now in the city of Boston, the mayoral election is is underway, and there's already been multiple articles that have come out that says Black Boston is going to determine the election. And so how could we ever say that we're going to organize and that we're going to win in a campaign, but that we're not going to listen to Black people and listen to communities of color? So yeah, it's all intertwined to me.
Truly. Black people have so much power. Black and brown people have so much power within community and so many other sectors, but just so much. The Davis system. I want to know, one, about your team, because you could not do all this alone. There's just no way. Everything needs team and community. And then two, I want to know what your vision and goals are for the Davis system in the future.
Yeah. So my team, as I mentioned earlier, my wife is our chief operating officer, a COO. She keeps us very organized. She leads on a number of different clients and projects that we have as well. And ultimately, like, she has to deal with me and all of my my meanness. I don't know what to say.
Meanness.
Yeah, I think being a CEO at times there's a lot of pressure, and you're providing for people, and so like being the spouse and also a business partner and also coworker, there's a lot of intertwinedness there. So her dealing with that means a lot. Our junior partner is Ta Nguyen, who I met when she was an 18-year-old intern working on a campaign with me. And a year or like a year and a half, 2 years later, she was graduating from college, and I was just like, I need you. Yeah, I need you. Ultimately, I've seen her dedication, how hard she works, and her willingness to learn. And like, she was the second person we brought on and has been with us since 2022. So 3 years now. And we've had other folks who've kind of been here and there. We've had other folks full time, kind of for extended periods of time, and we've brought on part-time help as needed for different projects that we worked on. So we kind of expanded and kind of brought our team back together as needed, but the three of us are really the core of the team since starting the Davis system. And in terms of longevity, like, this is one of my favorite questions. I see the Davis system, well, first of all, I see us having offices in Boston, DC, and Atlanta. It kind of bridges together my lived experience, being from the DC area, going to college in Atlanta, and then being able to start the business and grow it here. And I see us being an international brand as well. Like, I want to be able to do project management and community engagement across the globe. I don't want us to solely be restricted to here. We have taken on a lot of additional training as a part of our work and scope of work, and I think that the information that we have is valuable anywhere. And then long term, I feel like the Davis system's purpose in this world is really to help prepare the next generation of organizers, of elected officials, of people who are going to go work who are going to go work for elected officials, and people who are going to be community organizers, community advocates. We have been able to, right now we teach a class at Salem State University, which is my wife's alma mater, but we're teaching students kind of across that spectrum of either they want to go work in legislative offices, or they want to work on campaigns, or they want to run for office. This is now our fourth year teaching the class, and we've had students go on to do all of those things. And so for me, like, that is what I really feel as though, like, our calling really is. It's like, yes, we want to help get people elected right now, and we want to help these communities and organizations connect to community. But ultimately, I really feel like we're here to, like, prepare the next wave of people who are coming. And it goes back to just, like, my experience, having gotten a chance to work with a lot of young people earlier in my career, a lot of the campaigns I worked on, my role was always like the college campus coordinator. So it's like, how do you go to campus, create some energy, buzz, and like get them energized? But even that, it was full circle for me because I wasn't that kid in college. I wasn't, we talked about my freshman year. I wasn't that person. And so I just think that is ultimately like what the Davis system is building towards, is being that kind of incubator for the next generation.
What advice do you have for a student that may be interested in joining political campaigns or may be interested in starting their own business?
So, advice is to try everything. That's something that I've been telling a lot of younger folks recently, is that you don't know what you love to do, and you don't know what you don't want to do unless you try doing different things. And for me, like, that was something that I'm grateful that, again, I didn't know that. No one told me that, but I was able to do that in a way. Like I worked in a nonprofit. I worked for a nonprofit. I worked on campaigns. I worked in a legislative office for an elected official. And now I, have the business. And I would say in each of those different things, like, I saw what I liked and what I didn't like about those things. And it all pushed me towards the Davis system ultimately. Like, I enjoyed campaigns most of all out of those different things, experiences that I've had. But I also was like, I don't want to be an employee for campaigns forever. Like, I don't want to just work for one campaign at a time for the rest of my life. And so, all of those things push me towards the Davis system. And then I would say, I think kind of like following up on that piece about trying different things is not being afraid to try new things. Like, for me, it's funny, like, the story about me ending up on a campaign was that I got a call from a Morehouse brother. So the Morehouse network, I've quickly put a plug in. I've never had to apply for a job. I've never had to, I've done interviews, but I've never had to apply for a job because I've always gotten jobs through my Morehouse network. Morehouse brothers have always called me and said, hey, I got an opportunity. Can you come and do it? So this opportunity, I got a call from my Morehouse brother, Richard McDaniel, who's a mentor of mine, and he called me and asked me to come to Alabama in 3 days. I'd never been to Alabama. I was living in Maryland at the time, so it was a 14-hour drive. Never been to Alabama. I had never worked on a campaign. It was the first campaign I was working on, and I had to drive there from Maryland and be there in 3 days. Didn't have a job at the time. I packed up my stuff and I drove. And that, literally saying yes to that, even though I was terrified about the place, the opportunity, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know how much money I was going to be paid once I got there, but I just packed up and went. And it literally has now led to 9 years later, like, what I'm doing now. And so it's not ever being too prideful or letting fear cause you to say no to something that, just because you don't know what it is, because you never know where it may take you.
Oh my goodness. You drove to Alabama from Maryland knowing
3 days notice, had no idea where I was going to stay, didn't know what we were going to be paid. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And what I found out was, like, there were that was a part of the haze almost, like, that they were like, they wanted, like, the person, that Morehouse brother, when I say earlier I got dragged around the country, he's the one who dragged me around the country to work on campaigns. But it wasn't until ultimately I had to do that first one for him to see that I was willing to pack up and be in a place in 3 days, and also stay there for a month. And, like, I lived in Alabama basically for a month and a half at that point. And that, I was, like, again, afraid, confused, but ultimately it was the best decision of my life.
It started everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's so goosebumps. That's so good. That's so good. We're nearing the end. I want to know, well, this camera, let people know how they can connect with you.
So my business is on all social media platforms at the Davis System, either the Davis System or Davis System LLC. And then I'm on social media platforms at _AJ System. Actually, a lot of the business, the Davis System, and my social media platform, the AJ System, it derives from a love for Kobe Bryant, who he had the Kobe System, and it was all about his dedication, his drive, and how hard he worked at the things that he did. And so that's also kind of an impetus to how and why we work the way that we work on the Davis System as well.
Oh, wow. The Kobe System was an actual business, or was just like his thought process?
Process, yeah. Like he kind of branded it as like his mindset and kind of how he approached sports and basketball.
This deserves more time, but because I want to. How did that
part two?
We will. Okay, before we roll into our last question, I need to ask you this: How did Kobe's passing affect you?
So my wife actually, she was my girlfriend at the time, but she was the one who actually broke the news to me. It's funny. I was in Georgia about to walk into a training I was working on the Warren presidential campaign at the time, and I was about to walk into a training, and she called me and told me, and I literally couldn't do the training. I luckily had someone who was working with me and who was there who just took it on for me. And I remember driving home and bawling my eyes out. That's the death that probably of someone who I've never met, has impacted me the most in my life. It was so sudden. It was so unexpected. The tragedy of his daughter also being there as well. It was life-changing for me as well, because I feel like the Davis System hadn't been thought of before then. It kind of came after that. My wife always jokes with me that like most men don't want to have daughters sometimes, but I'm very intent on having a daughter. Like I want to be a girl dad because of Kobe. And like, yeah, it was just very impactful. I've had a chance to go out to LA a few times and visit his like memorial, the statues that they built for him. And that's been a really like cathartic experience for me. Like I've cried there. I've like had a moment and like just sat by the memorial. And so it's still something that like I'm watching a documentary or something and it comes up, like I'll start tearing up for sure. It's always, I feel like it'll be one of those things that you always remember where you were and like what you were doing in that moment.
Yes. And you don't realize how much people can affect or like, you know, how much influence they have on your life.
Yeah. And I felt kind of like goofy about it a little bit. Like, hey, especially like that the day it happened, like posting on social media about it. Like I ended up writing like a long Instagram post about it, but I needed to get that out.
Yeah.
And I needed to and there were other people who texted me, like who grew up with me, who understood like what he meant to me, like as an athlete growing up. And so it was like, even my mom, like to this day, like whenever she's watching something and it comes up, like she'll text me and just be like, "Oh, I'm watching this," and like I'm just so sad.
So sad.
She gets it.
Yeah.
It was a. I felt like it was also a unifying moment. Like I had people who I hadn't talked to like from high school in years who ended up hitting me up on that day, and that was even just like, that was beautiful. That's what his death kind of resulted in as well. Like I feel like a lot of people probably had similar experiences to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that was a tough day for a lot of us. So this is my last question. I ask all of my guests. I created this platform so I'm really big on knowledge. I think that will change the world. If you tweak someone's brain or work on their brain, you can literally change the world. So I wanted to create this platform in order for people to learn about new industries, learn about themselves, learn about others, learn. And to really be able to internalize and be like, okay, so what is this thing that I have in me that I love, that I can make a business or I can turn into, like, where I can work doing something that I'm extremely passionate about. So the question is, what is something that you wish more people knew? And that can be in regards to the Davis System, yourself, the world. I like the world. People like drop bombs about the world. All that. What's something that you wish more people knew?
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I'm thinking about a few different ways to go with it. But I think, what do I wish more people knew? If I'm being honest, I wish more people knew, but I also wish more people moved as if the world didn't revolve around them. I think we live in a very self-centered society where folks are concerned with their needs first. And that I think is applicable across sector. You see it in politics for sure, that the people who are in power want to remain in power, and they don't care about how that affects other folks in other communities. And I think even down to, a local level, a family level, a household level, it's like as you're raising children, how are you instilling in them service? How are you instilling in them giving back, and that the world isn't just here to serve them? And to me, I think that it's a really important lesson because it can avoid a lot of pain as well. When you have this mindset of things revolve around me and that the world revolves around me, when you're disappointed or someone doesn't live up to your expectations, you're easily kind of disappointed and thrown off. And I think that when you live a others focused life, when you live a service focused life, you can avoid a lot of that disappointment and pitfalls. You understand that everyone's human. You humanize everyone, and you don't look at them as what can they do for you. And so as much as you may have an expectation of people and communities, and I've been disappointed, especially like in campaigns and like looking at expecting like communities, especially Black communities, sometimes to vote and turn out in a way that I thought they would. But at the same time, I quickly step back and say, well, why not? Why didn't they? And what was the barrier to entry, and how can we change that moving forward? When you're self-centered, I think your response to that is, they don't appreciate me. They don't appreciate what we can do for them. They don't appreciate what we can do for their world, for their community. And that's such a lack of understanding. And it's such a, you lose more and more people like that. And I feel like right now, that's the direction like our society is going in, is that people are turning inward a lot more. And because they don't see themselves being, they don't see people actually meeting their needs. And I think that goes both ways. It's like, are you catering to people, and in turn, are they meeting your needs? And so I think like just kind of turning the focus towards others is a really important thing, because ultimately, the more that you improve the world for others, you're improving the world for yourselves and for your future, lineage, for your children, etc.
That was so good. That was so good. Okay, good. That was so good. I saw, this is the last thing I want to say, and then we're going to roll into our closing. But I recently saw on Instagram, somebody said on a podcast, they said, you are not the main character in everyone's story. You're the main character in yours. And sometimes people will float through the world thinking that they're the main character in everyone's, which you take on more heartbreak, you take on more pain because, they did that because they're upset with me, or they did that. That has nothing to do with you, baby.
Because they're living their experience and they're having their story.
Literally.
Today. Yeah, you don't know what happened before you got into that situation with them, and you don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with you. It's their story, their journey.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony, that's a perfect place to end. That was so good. I have to thank you so much for being here, for coming here, sharing your journey, sharing your story, taking the time. You're such a busy man, so thank you.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. This is always great, and I don't get to do this a lot, so it means a lot for me to. I mean, it's helpful for me because it reminds me of the why as well.
Yeah, yeah, brings you back to the basics. So we're gonna do this again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Lock me in.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys for watching if you watched. Thank you guys for listening if you listened. And you can catch Through with a Splash of Tea every Wednesday and Thursday on all streaming platforms, including YouTube. Bye now.